Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Kieran F. Knutson. I'm president of CWA Local 7250 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I'm making this video tonight to respond to the controversy around the National Guard being removed from the Labor Center in St. Paul. And because there's a controversy that's now involved the governor of the state of Minnesota and the leader of the Republicans in the State House and a number of labor officials, as well as our union, CWA 7250, I felt like it was important to explain what I think has happened and what this is all about. I think there's basically three things. One, there's the lie that's being told about it and spread all over social media. And it's not just a lie to make us look bad, but it's a lie to try and divide us up. And so I want to talk about that. Number two is what really happened at the Labor Center. And I know because I was there. So I'm going to tell you what happened. And number three is some history and context about why this is important to unions and to working class people in general. Number one, the lie. So what's being spread around in the media and social media and by various right-wing trolls is that a bunch of crazy radicals went down to the Labor Center and were really disrespectful to our troops and made them leave, and this is a terrible thing. Now, this lie has been repeated by Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, Kurt Daudt, the leader of the Republicans in the Minnesota House, by a number of labor officials, and by a bunch of right-wing trolls trying to cause trouble. But it's not true. And I think it's being repeated not just to make us look bad, but because they want to divide up the unions. They want us fighting each other over this question. And they want to divide up the unions from the Black Lives Matter movement and from the young people who are out in the streets protesting against police brutality and police killings. So there's a purpose behind this lie. And we shouldn't fall for what they're trying to do, which is to divide us up and to turn us away from the movement for justice in the Twin Cities. So what really happened is this. So-called Operation Safety Net, which is this militarized operation that's being conducted in the Twin Cities right now during the trial of Derek Chauvin, the police officer that murdered George Floyd in Minneapolis a year ago. And now in Brooklyn Center, in response to people's outrage over the murder of a kid, Dante Wright, in Brooklyn Center, they've combined a bunch of police departments and they've brought in the National Guard to back them up. And now there are armed soldiers all over the Twin Cities. It's a militarized environment. And so when we found out that National Guard were now also being staged at the St. Paul Labor Center, we were very concerned. The St. Paul Labor Center is run by the St. Paul Federation of Labor, which is a coalition of all the labor unions in the East Metro. Any union that has union members in that part of the state can join and pay dues. CWA Local 7250 is a member of the St. Paul Labor Federation. And no one asked us if it was okay if the National Guard stage out of their building. And talking to other labor officials and labor activists, I found out that no other unions had been asked either, including unions a lot bigger than ours. So we went down there to see what was going on, and I was picturing a couple of trucks and maybe 6 or 7 soldiers. Instead, there was 17 armored vehicles and over 50 soldiers occupying the Labor Federation building, the Labor Center. And they wouldn't even let me in. And I'm a local president of a affiliate union to that building. We are part owners of that building. So we asked the guard who had given them permission to be there, and we were finally able to get the name and number of somebody. We'd come to find out that one local president of one union had given them permission to go in. Now, the St. Paul Labor Federation is a coalition of dozens of unions. And having the National Guard there in this militarized environment is a controversial thing, to be sure, but there was no vote. The membership of the unions didn't get to vote. The unions didn't get to vote. The executive board of the St. Paul Labor Federation didn't even vote on it. So we called up this local president and told him what he'd done was undemocratic, that we had not had a chance to have input on this. And since this decision was undemocratic, he needed to reverse it. And to his credit, he came down there, he spoke with us, he spoke with the president of the St. Paul Labor Federation, and then they spoke with the Guard. And the National Guard packed up and left. And that was a good thing, in my opinion, because it's important that the unions not be associated with this Operation Safety Net, this militarization of our cities and suburbs, this backing up of these police departments, which have lost all credibility due to their conduct, the repeated way that the police murder people, particularly people of color and poor people, on a regular basis, just like they do all over the country. But here people have stood up against it. And so here the response from the system has been more police and now military troops on our streets. So it's important to me that the unions not be associated with this and not support this. And we hadn't had a chance to vote on it. So we told them they had to reverse that decision, and that's what happened. So to this idea that we were disrespectful, that's just not true. That's a lie. I didn't see anybody being disrespectful to the National Guard troops, to any of the soldiers. I know that I had several respectful, polite, interesting discussions with a number of different people in the National Guard, and I saw a number of other labor activists doing the same thing, even, shared a few laughs with some people. I don't have any disrespect towards the individual soldiers. And to be real blunt about it, my biological father was a Vietnam veteran. He did 2 tours in Vietnam as a Marine. My uncle was a Marine in Vietnam. My father-in-law was in the Air Force during the Vietnam War. And I have a brother-in-law that was in the National Guard. So I'm not disrespectful towards any soldier. I don't have a beef with an individual soldier. But that's different than talking about the mission. What is the mission? And I think all people have a right to question and oppose the missions of the military. And in the case of my family, and maybe many of yours, the missions that they were sent on were to fight and kill and be killed by other poor people around the world on behalf of the government and big corporations. So nothing to do with what's best for working class communities here or in those countries, but only what's best for the rich and powerful. So if Tim Walz or Kurt Doubt or Bill McCarthy wants to talk about disrespect, let's talk about that. And let's talk about how when soldiers come back from those wars, scarred, injured, many with severe PTSD, how they're thrown on the garbage heap by the government and by the big corporations. So if they want to talk about that as far as disrespect, we can talk about that. But not what happened the other night, because that wasn't disrespect. What the system does to veterans and to soldiers and to people all over the world is disrespect. That's the real disrespect. Don't be fooled by them. And the third thing I want to talk about is the history and context of the National Guard and the labor movement. While I don't have any beef with the individual soldiers in the National Guard, we represent people that are in the National Guard in our union. We have members who are in the National Guard, and we have friends and neighbors who are in the National Guard. The institution of the National Guard was set up. One of the reasons it was set up was to fight labor unions. That's just a historical fact. The National Guard has been used against militant strikers in this country again and again and again. They've been the armed soldiers that broke strikes, that were used to smash strikes, and including in Minnesota. There's at least a half dozen times the National Guard has been mobilized to smash strikes in Minnesota, including some of the biggest, most important strikes in the state's history. The big Teamsters strikes that brought unions to this city and to this region were attacked by the National Guard. The National Guard stormed the Teamsters headquarters and arrested the strike leaders and put them in an internment camp out at the state fair. During the 80s, when I was a teenager in Austin, Minnesota, when the P9, local P9, went on strike against the Hormel meatpacking plant and taking on the biggest meatpacking company in the country, they'd shut down the factory, and the strike was threatening to spread to other factories. And the National Guard was called in to reopen the plant and to escort scabs in and to help break the strike. That's just a historical fact. And so when they try and paint the picture that, you know, we were being rude and mean and unfair to our troops, we got to think about, well, whose troops were they? What is the mission? Who are they serving in this role? And then we have to connect it to what's happening today in Brooklyn Center, in South Minneapolis, and in North Minneapolis, and in St. Paul. What are these troops really there for? Are they there to protect people? Are they there to protect small businesses? Or are they there to back up the police who've lost legitimacy in the eyes of the people? And I think that's what this is about. This is a confrontation between the powers that be and those of us on the bottom, the working class and poor. And when I ran for this position, and the whole time I've been a union activist, you know, I've been preaching that the union's got to stick with the working class and the poor. And we have to always be against racism and sexism and homophobia and everything that divides up the working class. That it's not only the right thing to do, it's the only thing to do. We're not a real union unless we're doing those things, unless we're standing in solidarity with other working class people. So right now in Brooklyn Center, you know, Operation Safety Net is been shooting tear gas all throughout the community, filling up apartment buildings with tear gas, arresting people in their bathrobes coming out of their apartments, chasing kids into churches and surrounding the churches, hauling people's cars away, making mass arrests, arresting reporters, beating people up. You know, all of this is on camera. It's not something I'm making up. It's something you can watch on streaming right now, probably. And the same is being prepared for Minneapolis this week with the Chauvin trial. So it's very important that we be clear about what is going on in our city and what's going on in our state and which side we're on. I know not everybody's going to agree with me, and some people are probably going to disagree strongly. If you're a member of CWA 7250, you have a right to disagree, and you have a right to bring proposals to the next meeting, and you have a right to tell me I'm full of shit. And hopefully we can have a further discussion and dialogue about it. And if you support where I'm coming from, I hope you also speak up and you also add your voice, because I think it's important that people hear the voice of people who are sick of what's going on. I really appreciate you taking time to listen to what I'm talking about, and hit me up with comments or criticisms or questions. And I've been getting some death threats this week, so if you want to give me a couple of those, I'm good with it. All right, love and solidarity.